The students were told to prepare themselves for the event. They started to pick their best beast gear and left whatever they didn't need behind. They were then organized by the soldiers into their new groups. Once again, it seemed like even on the second day, all the first years were placed in the same group. This was to make the fights fairer and more enjoyable. Even if a first year was stronger, there was a key difference between them and the second year, which was using a soul weapon. As the students finished getting into their groups, several heads twisted and turned, and mumbling between the participants seemed to be going around quickly. They all realized that the infamous Zombie P was no longer there. Looking over at all the groups, Nate noticed that he wasn't with the newly found friend he had made, since he was a second year, but it also seemed like everyone turned to look at Quinn. "So, you're Zombie P's replacement?" a student in the group said. "I wonder what happened to him." Rather than being interested in Quinn himself, they were far more concerned about where or why Zombie P wouldn't be taking part in this fight. Seeing his ability, he couldn't have possibly been injured. This was the usual reason for someone dropping out of the tournament. If it was an injury, that wouldn't have been able to be healed on time before the next match. "All right, everyone, it's time to make your way up to the stage. Group A, please follow me." It was time for Quinn and the others to make their way to the arena. As Quinn was about to pass through the entrance, the soldier from before stopped him, for he had a newfound interest in him. "Wait, aren't you going to take any beast gear with you into the fight? If you don't have any, the rules state we can at least lend you some basic protection equipment." It wasn't beast gear, as that would be unfair to the others, but the man was worried about Quinn. He needed at least some thick leather. "It's okay," Quinn replied. "I have everything I need." Inside the booth, the 4 leaders, including the Supreme Commander Oscar, arrived in their seats. They were free to do what they wanted during regular events, but wanted to have the best seats in the house for the main 3 events. They had just finished watching the ranged event and crafting event. The big 4 families would often teach the same ability, but the ability varied in strength depending on the person. However, when watching, they still kept a close eye. There were many factions and other families that were under the banner of the Big 4. If they were to see a student who really interested them, they could invite them over to join a family under them, in turn, growing the power of their own. Finally, it was time for the fighting event. "The first years will be fighting first, correct?" Mona asked. "Is there anyone you have your eyes on?" Hearing this reminded both Bernie and Owen of their encounter with the Blade Child. He was in his first year. After hearing no news of anything happening yesterday, they assumed he might have just wanted to practice with their powers. Anyway, whatever the child wanted to do, it was none of their business. "That child named Zombie P interests me," said Owen. "His regeneration speed was remarkable, and yet somehow, even without any beast gear, he was able to deliver a knockout punch. Perhaps he is skilled in the martial arts. He wouldn't be the first person to perform superhuman feats beyond the norms of the human body," Mona replied. "What was his name?" "I believe he finally decided to become a teacher." "You are talking about Sergeant Leo," Oscar replied. "And unfortunately, we won't be seeing Zombie P perform in today's match. I got a report this morning from the doctor. He can't move. His whole body is frozen. They think it's possibly a drawback from whatever powers he displayed yesterday." Hearing this, Jack was pleased. It seemed like Duke had pulled through for him again. "Of course, a healing power that strong would have its drawbacks," Bernie said, with his arms crossed as he snorted hot air from his large nostrils once again. "Then, that means we will see a new person?" Mona asked. "This won't be fun at all. The substitute is a substitute for a reason, simply because they weren't good enough to be picked in the first place. If it happened in the first round, sure, it might have been entertaining, but the students that are left are quite strong. I almost feel sorry for the student." Although Jack didn't feel sorry for the student, he thought it would be an incredibly quick match. After the surprise turn of events of yesterday, Jack didn't want the same thing to happen twice. Out of all the first-year students participating in the event this year, he made it so the Duke would allow him to fight the strongest one. At least, the strongest one he could get. There were a couple of first-year students who were part of the Big 4 families. Those he didn't want to get involved in too much, so he picked the next best choice. He wanted to humiliate Peter while drawing out Pure, but with Pure already succeeding in their task, the opponent he had prepared would now be going against the substitute. The platforms had been prepared and spread out across the arena floor. This time, the platforms were at least 2 times the size of the previous ones. This was because there would now be only 5 fights displayed at the same time, It also showed for more large-scale fighting and fewer defeats via knockout from falling off. It was boring to see the participants just falling to the ground. The audience would much rather watch a display of great skills. "Please, everyone, welcome your first round of participants." The crowd cheered loudly as it was the last event of the day. They always did save the best until last, which was why no one had left, and it seemed like not a single seat was empty in the arena. The participants slowly walked onto the stage, and just like everyone else, they too soon realized that one of their favorites from the first round wasn't there. The crowd wasn't too bothered, but the students in particular were surprised. "What? Where's Zombie P? I can't see him. Does this mean he won't be fighting? Yeah, look, there's someone I haven't seen before. Something must have happened and now the substitute has to fight." The camera on screen focused on all the participants, one by one, as they made their way to the platform, and the crowd could see their big faces appear. That's when Owen noticed the boy who had taken Zombie P's place. "Now this is interesting," he thought as his eyes widened. He quickly took out the mask from his waist and opened it outward, covering his mouth. He didn't want the others to see him smile. "That was a boy who was with the Blade family child. Wasn't he only a level 1, if I remember correctly? I see it now," Owen thought. Like a jigsaw puzzle, things were coming into place for him. It would be stupid to put just any level 1 ability user in there. And he remembered the boy saying something strange. He remembered he stated he had beaten the game at level 5, yet didn't go any higher than that. Based on their reaction and him being in the tournament now, it had to be him in the video. Coming to this realization, he did everything he could to hold in his laughter, but failed as his shoulders began to move up and down. "What's so funny?" Jack said, seeing his slanted eyes that were shaped like 2 crescent moons, peeking just above the shaking fan. "I think we will be in for a surprise today," Owen said. The names of each of the participants were announced, as they then rose onto the large pillar-like platform. Finally, they had gotten to Quinn and his opponent. "First, we have the student who dominated their last round and gave us an amazing show. Please welcome the Multiplier." "Oh, he was a good one. He is one of the ones I had my eye on," Mona said excitedly. "Wait, isn't he going against the substitute? What a shame. I thought this time we might see more of his skills." "What is the substitute's ability, Oscar?" Owen asked out of interest. Oscar then sighed as he heard this. "I honestly don't know what they were thinking, but they managed to convince management, saying he is one of the students currently with the highest number of points in their base. It turns out he has no ability at all," Oscar replied. "I can't believe they're wasting our time on this. You should have stepped in and done something. I thought you were in charge of this place," Bernie complained. "Sadly, I only got the report just before entering this room." "Oh, I wouldn't worry too much," Owen interjected. "I think we will all be more surprised than you think." The others chose to ignore Owen's words. To them, it seemed like the youngster who just wanted a different option compared to everyone else, like a child who would say the opposite answer compared to the whole class just to get attention. And his opponent, unfortunately, Zombie P, has had to exit from the tournament due to a medical emergency. This means today we have a replacement. Please welcome to the stage, the Cursed Child. From above, Vorden and the others all shook their heads and slapped it in disappointment. What's with his name sense? Vorden thought. Couldn't he think of something a little less cringy? Layla started to giggle a little. I kind of like it. It's better than his other name anyway. The reason for choosing this name was because of how he felt at the time, and felt similar to when he had created his vampire family. He also didn't want to choose a name that gave away his abilities, and on top of that, he wasn't able to use his old favorite name, the Bloody Volver. Beep, beep, beep. 3 beeps indicated it was time for the event to start, and as soon as it did, shadow equip. Shadows surrounded Quinn's body, legs, and arms, and a few seconds later, they dispersed, revealing all of his equipment. The soldier watching from below smiled while looking at the screen. You really did have everything you need. But the one who was even more shocked and more excited was Nate. He has gauntlets? Another Year 1 student who uses gauntlets as a weapon. A strange level 1 user just like the Zombie P. Now that I think about it, that kick as well. Skillful in martial arts. It can't be. Is he the Bloody Volver? Other than the people that were there to support Quinn, Nate, and the soldier. Not many others were looking at his match. They simply thought it was a done deal when they had heard the word substitute. No one could blame them for feeling that way. In the years before, when a substitute had come onto the stage, the match was usually over fairly quickly. This was the same for inside the booth as well, as they decided to look at other potential fights that maybe they weren't able to catch last time. Even Jack's gaze had wandered off into the direction of others. The only person who had seen the quick shadows forming and disappearing was Owen. "You are surprising me even more. Turns out you do have the ability. How did you manage to hide that from the military for so long?" Owen said. "More importantly, why would you?" When the others' attention had returned to the platform Quinn was fighting on, they were surprised to see him wearing beast gear that he wasn't wearing before. "Did I miss something?" Bernie said, confused. "Are you talking about Arena 5? Mona replied. "I was sure he didn't have beast gear on as well either." Owen then started to giggle away in the corner like a little girl, knowing he was the only one who had seen what had happened. "How about we have a little wager on the fight going on in Arena 5? Owen said, waving his fan on his head. The wind was moving his long curly hair that somehow wasn't going all over his face. "Greylash," Oscar said, "you know that's against the rules." "Don't be silly," Owen replied. "Fine, if you want to be such a sour grape, then we don't have to bet anything." "What's the point?" Mona interjected. "There is a clear winner unless you know something we don't." Owen didn't know much, but it was as if the signs were telling him this boy was special. There were a few things that he did know compared to them. He was friends with the powerful Blade family. He was able to beat the block game past level 5, and finally, he had an ability that was hidden from the military. All of these were why Owen was confident that the one named Cursed Child would win. "Do you all agree with what Miss Bree said?" Owen asked. All of the people in the room remained silent. Common sense just told them that it wasn't possible, and again, they just felt like the Greylash was trying to cause drama. "Then I will take your silence as a yes. All of you are against me. If the Cursed Child is to win the fight, then I get first to pick when sending out invitation letters to the students. If I lose, then I will have to pick up what's left." "Deal," Bernie said with cheer in his voice. It seemed like a foolish offer to him, and it was also a chance for him to get one up on the arrogant new young master. "I can shove it in his face." Although the others didn't believe anything special would happen, what the bet had done was made sure that everyone's eyes in the booth were now following Quinn's fight and not the others, just at the slight chance that perhaps Greylash could see something. Looking carefully at his opponent in front of him, Quinn was able to see that the student was a level 8. Thankfully, he was also a Year 1 student, which meant he didn't have to worry about him having a soul weapon. The student's most likely an original, then. I didn't get to see the first batch of fights because I was too busy dealing with Sia at the time. I need to be careful until I find out what his ability is. This was Quinn's debut fight, his stage, and he wasn't going to act so rashly. Perhaps he would have performed differently, but the fight previously with Vorden had shown him his place. There were still powers and abilities out there that were far stronger than his current shadow. It wouldn't always protect him from everything. Analyzing the multiplier closer, he could see a high level of beast equipment as well. The inspection skill allowed him to break it down even further. From head to toe, he was covered in intermediate armor, and in his hand was a pair of daggers at the advanced level. There were also small little blades across his belt. Trying to get the upper hand, Quinn tried to use the inspection skill on him as well, hoping to find out his ability. However, it had only come up with question marks. His inspection skill was only able to tell him basic abilities and not originals. Seeing his opponent was still on the other end of the platform, he was thinking of what to do. With no blood spray, the impact of his punches would have lessened, and with no blood swipe and crescent kick, his range was limited. For the first time, he was starting to see how handy the combination of his blood powers and shadow powers were, when he was limited on attacking options. The shadow acted more as a shield and a support attack for his blood powers, but here, where he couldn't use them, he was limited. The two students stood looking at each other, and eventually, Quinn grew tired of waiting. If he's not going to show his powers, then I don't need to show mine. Windwalk! The skill on his boots was activated, and he dashed forward with all his strength. It looked like he managed to cover the area of the arena in an instant. The boots, when activated, glowed slightly red, showing they were in use. "He's moving that fast! How good is the equipment he's wearing?" a student asked. But it wasn't just the equipment alone, it was also Quinn's natural speed that had made him travel so fast. Multiplier looked like he was shocked as he braced himself for the attack. Quinn threw out a fist as quick as he could, wanting to get the first hit. The punch landed right in his opponent's face. Is this a level 8? Quinn thought as he saw his attack hit his opponent clean. As the man's face moved to the side, Quinn double-checked to see if he was seeing things. Behind the multiplier was another person who looked the same as him. The first one that had been hit, and he puffed into a cloud of black air. The second, who was behind him, swung his dagger from below towards Quinn's face, but his reactions were fast, and using the gauntlets, Quinn was able to block the first attack with his forearm. A large dent was made across from his elbow upward as the attack was deflected. It was clear the daggers were better quality than his gauntlets. Durability 80 of 100. Wanting to attack again, Quinn threw out his leg, performing a roundhouse kick to his waist. Suddenly, something from underneath came sweeping across the floor, hitting his other leg that was on the floor, causing him to fall to the floor. Now looking up from the floor, Quinn could see the clear blue sky, but at the same time another 2 multipliers. They both came rushing down trying to stab Quinn with their 4 daggers. What they didn't expect was for Quinn to be too fast. Moving his hands at a speed that couldn't be seen, he pulled both of their legs. Their bodies fell to the floor. Once he got up, he performed an axe kick, kicking one of them in the stomach. The same thing as last time had occurred. The person had puffed into black smoke. Quickly turning around, he kicked the other, and it was the same result. Looking around the arena, Quinn finally understood. I should have known. His name was a dead giveaway, Quinn said. Standing in the center, Quinn had been surrounded by 6 students who looked the same. A cloning ability? Layla asked. It's a bit more than that, Forden replied. The user can produce clones in an instant, as long as he has enough MC cells to do so, judging by the number of clones he's already created and how freely he is producing them. He has a lot. So that's why when Quinn hits them they keep bursting into smoke? She asked. The clones can usually take a fair bit of damage before puffing into smoke. My guess is Quinn's attack is a lot stronger than it looks to everyone else. The problem is, although they are just clones, their weapons and everything about them are very real. The attacks will hurt just as much as if it was done from the original. So if he defeats the original, he can beat them all then, right? Technically, yes, but there's another problem. Judging by his MC level being a level 8 and him being in this tournament, he's most likely also learned his family's body swap skill. It allows the user to switch the real body with one of the clones whenever they wish. You explained everything perfectly, Vorden, Logan said as he was typing away on a small little computer. It had been constructed via his little spiders. I looked up information on the Multiplier's family. They are an original, and everything you described is accurate. Sam had decided to keep quiet, but he too thought it was amazing that a normal student knew so much information without looking it up, especially about an original family. The 6 multipliers all surrounding Quinn reached for the small blades around their waist. There was nowhere to hide, and they were guaranteed a hit. He could block the ones from the front, but it would be near impossible to block them from the back. Well, 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 Burns said from inside the booth. Looks like we were right. It seems the Grey Lash was just trying to cause drama for no reason. All you did was manage to waste our time. I have to admit, Mona said, I got a little excited when I saw him dashing forward at such a fast speed, but that speed seems to be useless now. Owen remained silent. He thought the others were silly. Could they not see the same thing he was seeing? Looking at Quinn, was that the look of someone who looked like they were about to lose? The multiplier, at the same time as each of his clones, threw out 2 daggers each towards the center. They came out fast and powerful. Boring, Jack said, but soon he started to think differently. For some reason, a smirk had appeared on the cursed child's face. Shadow control. From the bottom of his feet, a thin veil of purple shadow had appeared and had stopped all of the little blades in their tracks mid-air. They hovered in place and were unable to move forward. What power is that? Nate said, looking at the screen. Inside the arena, 2 of the 5 fights had come to an end, and only 3 of the fights remained. The camera had decided to focus on Quinn's match at this very moment. They could see that the multiplier was trapped and thought another contestant would soon be eliminated from the competition. When the daggers were thrown, everybody waited in anticipation of what the multiplier would do to follow up this attack, and how he would dismantle his opponent as he had done previously. What they didn't expect was the sudden reveal of a strange power that no one had ever seen before. The sheet of purple shadow rose from Quinn's feet surrounding him. It was moving ever so slightly, and the small blade seemed to have stopped just as they touched it. "Hey, do you know what ability that is?" a person from the crowd asked. "No, I've never seen anyone with it before." "I wonder what it does or how it works." "Wait, what is Quinn doing?" Layla shouted. "Why is he showing his powers? And worst of all, right now in front of everyone." Sam looked carefully at the strange power. He had expected Quinn to be hiding something. He even thought he was 100% sure that he was the Blood Evolver, but he had never seen the Blood Evolver do this before. Even if they had learned a new skill, there was a clear difference between what he was seeing right now. The Blood Evolver's powers produced a red aura, while this was purple and dark. It felt different. "I assume you have something to do with this?" Logan said, looking at Vorden since he seemed to be the only one who hadn't acted so surprised at the outcome. "He's sick and tired of hiding," Vorden replied. "I can feel it, and I think you guys can too. The whole situation was just frustrating him more and more as the days went by. Sooner or later this was going to happen, so might as well do it now." "But won't people come after him after they learn about his background?" Layla asked. "He was an orphan, and the military knew he had no ability before. The others will try to ask for the ability book or try to find out how he learned this." "Don't worry. After this, I told him he could say my family is looking for him, and he gave the ability book to them for safekeeping." "And what original family do you come from?" Sam asked. If Vorden was confident to use his family's name to protect a rare ability, they had to be strong. If they weren't, then others would still try to attack or pressure them in some way to obtain the ability book. "My family is the Blade family," Vorden responded. Sam started to think hard if he had ever heard such a name before, but he tried and tried. He was quite knowledgeable and even knew some medium-sized factions and families, but the Blades just didn't seem to ring a bell. However, since his family was original and managed to stay that way, it meant it would still give Quinn some protection. When abilities started to become more well-known around the world and families began to reveal themselves, some of the original families were broken up and had their abilities learned and stolen, eventually making them known to the public. They then were no longer known as originals. Only the more potent abilities, or the ones under the big three at the time, were able to keep their abilities and powers to themselves. If Vorden's family was still considered an original, they had to have some influence, right? Opening up a part of the shadow from the front, the small blades moved again, and Quinn had blocked them with his gauntlets. He then moved out from where the shadow was originally placed, and allowed for the shadow to return to him. As soon as he did this, the blades continued to move forward, wholly missing and falling off the arena. 94 of 100 MC cells. The small blades were only at the basic tier level. This was why Quinn knew he could block it with only a thin layer of the shadow. At the same time, the damage it had done was small. Shadow cloak skill activated. Then, in front of everyone's eyes on the stage and from the booth, Quinn had disappeared entirely. The stronger ones could still sense where Quinn was, as this was only a visual effect, an illusion almost, but to the crowd they now couldn't see anything. Multiplier himself had quite keen senses and could tell Quinn was still here, but found it hard to pinpoint his exact location. The problem was, Quinn was too fast. While attacking, the shadow cloak was disabled, and a fist seemed to come flying out of nowhere, delivering a punch to the head. The puff of black smoke appeared once more. Not that one. Seeing another one not too far away, he decided to use the flash step, moving right in the position of the next person. Without hesitation, an uppercut was delivered, and with it, another cloud of smoke appeared. From behind, his sensitive ears had picked up the sounds of footsteps running up to him. Quickly spinning his body and lifting his leg, he performed a spinning back kick, hitting Multiplier through the air and off the arena ground. All the fights around them were now being ignored. With each puff of black smoke appearing, the crowd cheered in response. It was as if they were watching a skilled traveler take on several men at once. While one person came towards Quinn at the front, another was behind him. The two daggers came toward both his body and his head. Using both of his hands, Quinn was able to grab him by the wrist, but that didn't stop the second person from coming behind. Is he done for? The crowd thought. But Quinn knew all along what was happening. From underneath his feet, the shadow rose once again, stopping the attack. 80 of 100 MC. The attack had been blocked, but this time it had taken a lot more of his MC points to deal with it. This was due to the weapon being an advanced tier 1. Throwing out a kick towards his opponent's stomach finished the first one off, and then with a spin with the back of his fist hitting the one behind him, the two opponents had been finished off. Looking around him and at the arena, he could still see the 6 of the same person, even though he had already defeated multiple clones. What Quinn didn't know was the Multiplier was able to switch his real body with any of the clones he created at any time. The Multiplier not once had even gotten close to Quinn. How he wished he was able to use his blood abilities right now. Using a blood swipe, he could attack far away or with the crescent kick, and if there were multiple enemies, he could use the blood spray. There was another problem. Sooner or later, his MC points would run out. The weapon the Multiplier used was strong, and it could only block so many more attacks. Quinn was careful not to get hit, and if he did and the fight got rough, there was a good chance his blood bank would automatically activate. His healing wasn't as impressive as Peter's, but it was still to the point where one could think he had a healing ability. This in turn would cause so many questions to be asked. "Well, it looks like this match certainly has gotten interesting," Owen said, giggling away. "I knew you wouldn't play fair," Bernie replied. "You knew he had an ability, didn't you?" "I knew no such thing. How would I know information that not even Oscar knew?" Owen replied. Bernie was now looking at Oscar for the answer. If anyone should have known about his powers, it should have been him. Oscar was starting to wonder how Owen knew or came to know of this as well. "I think this makes the whole thing a lot more interesting," Mona added. "It would have been boring otherwise. Besides, a bet is a bet. Even if you did know he had an ability, the Multiplier is one of the strongest people in this tournament, and the fact still doesn't change. Besides, we all know how the Multiplier likes to toy with his opponents from the last fight, and he still hasn't shown everything he's got. Although, with the cursed child, I do wonder what level his ability is at." "It's a hard one to judge," Owen replied. "The ability itself doesn't seem to have many attacking opportunities. If the user himself wasn't so skilled in hand-to-hand combat, then this fight might have been long over. However, it also seems the ability itself is versatile. It cloaked him, making him almost invisible, and also, it can be moved around at will like an elemental power. I have a feeling we haven't seen everything yet." Back on the platform, Quinn slowly made his way back into the center. The others found this quite the amateur move as it allowed him to be surrounded. If he stood near the outer edge, he was able to face opponents coming from one direction. Yes, there was a higher chance one would be knocked off the stage, but it still gave him better options. Still, Quinn knew if he wasn't the aggressor, he would eventually lose this fight. Once in the center, all the clones threw their small blades again, and Quinn repeated the same action, lifting the shadow and blocking the attacks. "I can do this all day, come on!" Quinn shouted, hoping that the Multiplier would try something new. All of them switched and pulled out their daggers. "Oh, do you think you've won?" the Multiplier spoke. While speaking, each of his clones spoke simultaneously, and the voice sounded louder together like an odd choir. "You do know I've been playing around with you this whole time. You see, I like to toy with my opponents, sometimes making them feel like they are winning. For some matches, I start with 2. For others, I begin with 4. After seeing how easily you dealt with my clones, I decided on 6. But I guess that wasn't enough." Behind the 6 people that surrounded the arena, another 6 people were seen behind them as they moved to the side to make 12. It was the first time in the tournament the Multiplier had ever used 12 people to fight so far. "Let's see how you deal with this," the Multiplier said, as all 12 clones decided to charge in towards the center at the same time. "Perfect," Quinn said. "Shadow Void." A thick purple shadow spread out from his feet across the floor in all directions from where Quinn stood. Once it reached a particular area, it started to rise, eventually creating a small dome shape. The dome encased both Quinn and all the clones with him. From the outside, the public suddenly couldn't see anything but a purple dome of moving shadows. "What's going on?" the crowd said. "Are they still fighting in there? This has to be that cursed child's ability, right?" "Are you starting to feel nervous about our little bet?" Owen asked. "Although I don't know what this strange dome thing does, I cannot believe one person could take on 12. I didn't even know the Multiplier could copy himself that many times. If I have him in one of my families, it would be like having a little squad. He would be able to go out on solo missions on his own." As time went by and nothing was happening, even Bernie was starting to get nervous. It shouldn't have taken this long for someone to beat one person. Finally, the shadows around started to fade away slowly. They began to disappear from the top of the dome to the bottom, and eventually returned to the original user's 2 feet, where one person could be seen standing, while the other was beaten entirely and knocked out on the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner, the Cursed Child!" Chaos had occurred in the arena. It was something the others hadn't expected. One of the favorites from the first years had been defeated, and what was worst, the others weren't even able to see how it was done. "That's impossible," Bernie said, standing up from his seat. At the same time, he banged the side of his armchair. It briefly went up in flames before the whole side of the thing burnt to a crisp. It was amazing how quickly it disappeared, to not affect the whole chair. "Calm down," Oscar demanded. Bernie was always a hot-headed fool, and he knew this bet was a bad idea. However, even Oscar didn't think this would be the outcome, so he allowed it to continue. "Can't you see," said Bernie, "that kid, he didn't just win, but there isn't even a single scratch on him." The others had of course noticed this as well. For this to have happened, the fight inside the dome couldn't have been a close one. The dome-shaped shadow was either very powerful, or it was there to conceal the boy's real strength from the eyes of everyone else. Jack's whole body was shaking, but not because he was upset. It was out of joy. A mysterious power that was able to rival top original families, yet didn't belong to any of the big four. This was the perfect opportunity for him. Whatever he did, he needed to get this power for himself. However, there was a small problem, something he never thought would get in the way, and that was the bet. Jack was one of the ones that hadn't spoken up when the deal was made, meaning Owen was able to get the first choice when inviting students to their families. There was no way a student would turn down such an offer from one of the big four. Perhaps there was some way he could persuade him. Once the event was over, he would contact the others at his tower to find out everything they could about the boy named Cursed Child. "Well, I must say I think I've got a pretty bright future ahead of me," Owen said, laughing. Oscar looked at the student one more time standing in the arena. "Looks like I need to speak to the people at the second base. How they were this tardy to not notice something like this is beyond my comprehension. Anyway, Quinn Talon, I shall be keeping an eye on you." The cheering in the arena had continued for a lot longer than usual. People always seemed to love the unexpected. It was exciting to think about what this new power and surprise could do. While standing in the center, Quinn looked down at the multiplier and started to recall what happened when the shadow void had been cast. Even with the void covering the view of the others, Quinn couldn't use his blood abilities. There was a high chance that the influence skill wouldn't work on him. He would then reveal to everyone what had happened after the fight. It was a risk he still couldn't take. However, what the multiplier also didn't realize was he wasn't the only one who had been holding back the whole fight. As the multiple clones came towards him, for a brief second, Quinn closed his eyes and started to think back to the block game. With the slightest sound, the slightest movement, he was able to see the attacks as they moved. The multiplier was doing near enough the same thing, using his clones to attack him from multiple directions, and even though there were 12 of them, there was only so much space that could be used to attack. The 12 had come towards him. He could see a slight twitch in the first one's shoulder. He attacked as soon as he saw the slightest movement, and the first one was down. Using all of his limbs, his legs, his arms. Quinn blocked, dodged, and allowed even the clones to hit each other. Everything was done at a speed that hadn't been used in the match before. "Vex was a lot more versatile when I fought him with his strings," he said as he hit one clone. "Vorden's ability was a lot stronger than this," as he kicked another. "And the King-tier beast was a hell of a lot faster," he said as he punched the last clone in the stomach. All 12 of the clones had been defeated. Only one remained away in the distance towards the edge. "I need to make more," Multiplier said, but his energy was starting to drain. There wasn't enough time to recover, as Quinn's strength was strong enough to deal with the clones with a single blow. It was something the Multiplier had never dealt with before. As he started the cloning process, he felt something weird wrapping around his legs and arms. When he looked, he could see multiple purple dark hands grabbing his limbs. "What is this? Why isn't my cloning working?" he said, shocked. Quinn had half expected this. His shadow could slow down the time of whatever it was touching, and due to how the Multiplier's ability worked right now, it was taking an incredibly long time to even clone himself. With this, the Multiplier started to panic. He'd always relied on his skills to move from one clone to another. In his haste, he hadn't realized if he had just concentrated on using all of his strength to break free from the shadow, he would have been able to break free. Instead, he repeatedly attempted to clone himself, but it just didn't seem to work. Finally, though, he was able to detach his right arm as he calmed down a little and started to think straight. 20 of 100 MC. But it was useless, as more arms instantly came toward him, grabbing him and putting him in place up against the wall of the shadow void again. "I better finish this in one blow," Quinn said, seeing how low his MC points were. Standing in front of the original Multiplier, he was able to finally use a skill that wouldn't be wasted. Stomping his foot onto the ground and allowing the energy to rise, he pulled back one hand and snapped explosively with the other. "Hammer strike!" The regular hammer strike was performed, and the fist sunk into the chest piece right in the center. In nearly an instant, his eyelids started to close, and the multiplier had been knocked out. "I guess you never really been hit like that before, have you?" Quinn thought, realizing he had been beaten with a single punch. The void skill was cancelled, and the victor's name had been called. "Can you believe it? Is that Quinn from our class? Wasn't he always a weakling?" The students in Dell's class were amazed. However, some started to worry. "Hey, didn't you used to pick on him and Peter? You better apologize, man." "What, you think he'll remember that?" They had just witnessed someone defeat a level 8. Most of the students who were in Dell's class weren't even past the level 5, and suddenly, all those that once shunned or talked badly about him were afraid. Perhaps he isn't the Blood Evolver after all," Nate said, noticing that not a single red aura skill was displayed. But some signs were confusing. He had seen kicks and punches, as well as the flash step. These were all skills the Blood Evolver performed. "Still, you're just another person for me to get excited over." Once the matches were over, the students were taken off the platforms and rushed to the side to get emergency care from the standby doctors. After a few minutes, the multiplier had woken up. It turned out his injuries weren't too bad, and his armor had absorbed most of the impact of the punch. Although there were still some internal injuries, he would need to be treated for later. He had never been struck so hard before, and with the fear of everything happening, he had passed out. Before the next set of events, they would have interviews with the participants in between. They interviewed each one until they finally went to the 2 people who they were looking forward to most, the participants of Match 5. The first to be interviewed was the unexpected loser of the match, Multiplier. They sat by the side of the arena by a bench where all the doctors and other participants were seen being treated in the background. The female reporter was there, ready with her microphone. At the same time, her drone companion was filming everything for everyone to see on the big screen. "First, I would have to say you put on quite a show for everyone today, and it came as quite a surprise to us with the result today. Many people here expected you to win. It seemed like everything was going your way until one point, once that void was created. Can you tell us what happened in there, or if you remember anything at all?" the reporter asked. Recalling the memories of the dark place was not a pleasant thought, and the shock of a loss was still hitting him quite hard, so he was slow to answer. "Yes, I remember what happened in there. Hands." "Hands?" the reporter said with a confused look on her face. "There were hands everywhere. They grabbed me, all over the place, and I couldn't move. Black, shadowy like hands, and that's when he delivered the final blow." Hearing this from up in the booth, Jack's eyes looked as if they were about to jump out of his sockets. What did he say? Dark, shadowy hands? The words that had been spoken had brought up a memory for him when he had visited the second military base. These were memories he would never forget. He was embarrassed and humiliated as the 2 students were saved by Pure. 2 people had interfered and had gotten in his way. After the events, he had his 2 guards file a report. Kenny talked about how a strange user who seemed to control a shadow had fought him. Not only that, but there was also the mention of hands as one of the skills, along with other things. Now that he thought about it more, the description matched near perfectly enough with the report his guard Kenny had given him. The powers used back then and the powers used now were the same. This brought him to one conclusion about Quinn. He works for Pure! After this revelation, Jack couldn't believe it. Slowly it was starting to make sense of how they knew his every move and how they could plan against him. Of course, Pure would have put a student spy into the school system. Just as they rescued Peter before, they most likely used him to do the same here as well. You were always one step ahead of me, and now I know why, but now I'm one step ahead of you, Jack said with a smile as he got up from his seat. Where are you going, Jack? Oscar asked. Are you not going to watch the rest of the fighting events? There are some important business matters I need to look into. Don't worry, I shall be back soon. Jack left the room and started walking at a fast pace out of the booth to head back to his room. There was still a few things he needed to think about before he could make his next move. Even if Quinn was a part of Pure, that didn't change the fact that he had a rare ability that no one had seen before. Suddenly claiming the student was part of Pure might make it harder for him to obtain the boy's powers. He wanted both Pure and the Shadow power for himself. Quinn was the key to that. Once Jack had returned to the room, he had contacted his headquarters back at Dreamland City. A digital display on his wall connecting a video call. Immediately, he had called for his old guard, Kenny, who had made the report about the Shadow powers before. That's right, sir. Everything you said matches up with exactly what I saw that day. Kenny replied. Just then another message had appeared on screen, which was from Sergeant Duke. The information about the student I requested. Quickly he started to read through the report. Quinn Talon, only child, orphan. Pfft, the perfect backstory for an agent of Pure, no surprise there. While Jack was busy talking about his team and doing research on Quinn, over at the arena, the reporter had just finished talking with Multiplier. She was now moving on to the star of the show, Quinn. First, I have to congratulate you on your victory. Of course, we all saw your impressive martial arts skill when fighting the clones, but what we want to know about is your ability. My research says that you're not from an original family. Still, I don't think any of us here have ever seen an ability like that before. So what we want to know is just how and what ability is that? The reporter asked. Quinn looked at the big screen and he could see his face maximized for everyone to see. Everyone in the crowd was waiting for his answer. He then thought back to what Vorden had said, and he was ready to reply. As you said, I'm not from an original family. I grew up as an orphan. The detail of how I learned the ability is a story and a half, so bear with me. An incident happened at school a while back, where I was transported to a red portal planet. The whole place seemed abandoned. While I was there, I came across an ability book I had never seen before. I currently didn't have an ability, and I thought my luck had finally changed. The school eventually found me and returned me safely, but I chose to keep the fact I had found the book a secret. This event happened a few months back. Due to it being a high-level ability book, it took me a long time to learn. Even after learning it, with no teacher or reference on how to use the ability, it took a while to come up with my skills. I wasn't ready and chose to hide this from everybody. As an orphan and no family or factions to protect me, this felt like the right thing to do. However, today a good friend of mine had offered in return for giving them the ability book, I would become a member of their faction and family. As for the ability itself and which family that is, I think you will all understand why I won't go into further details about that now, as it's not fair to the original family who took me in. Before I end this interview, I have one last thing to say. Once again, Quinn looked up above the arena, where his friends and Vorden would be standing. If you chose to still go after me, then the chains that have been locked away for centuries shall be broken by the blades. There were many questions the reporter had wanted to ask, but Quinn had already started walking away after saying those few words. After hearing Quinn's story, the people in the crowd could understand the reasoning of what had happened so far and why the student had chosen to do what he had done. However, the families and factions in the crowds felt like what the student had just done was outright silly. Even if he didn't reveal the family's name that was protecting the book, they would soon find out. Declaring that this family had the ability book was putting a target on their back, and unless they were one of the big four, there was unlikely anything that would stop them from trying to take it from this family. However, the reaction in the booth was a completely different one. The last words had sent a shiver down each of the big three in the room's spine. Goosebumps were felt all over the place. Owen shouted in his head. For the first time, he wasn't so giggly and cheery as his usual self. Instead, he was biting his fingernails. I knew this was a possibility after I saw the two of them were friends, but who would have thought? Now no one can touch him. Those last lines, Mona thought. They were quite clearly a code that only we would know. Oscar had noticed a slight change in the room. Usually they were quite a rowdy bunch, especially with Bernie and Owen always bickering at each other, but now there was complete silence. Was it something the boy said, he thought? But he was concerned with a different matter. If what the student was saying was true, the red portal he had access to must have come from the military base they were at, which meant it was a planet the military had explored. Why was there such an ability book on a planet like that? Oscar wished to delve further once this whole event was over. Perhaps he would find clues about the ability book and what had happened on the red portal planet. It might even lead him to the original owners of the ability book. The rest of the event continued as usual, and Jack eventually returned with a smile on his face. The event had now been going on for a while, and during it, not a word was spoken. They hadn't focused on the matches at all. Each one of them's minds was filled with other matters, and finally, the event had come to an end. The Big Four returned to their rooms, and so did the Supreme Commander. As Jack went back, he started to think of a plan he could put in place. If he was only to inform the military of the matter without the others knowing, then maybe they would allow him to take the boy's ability. It would also make sure the power didn't fall into the other three's hands, and he knew they would like that. Still, it was a little risky. The best time to do anything would be when the boy returned to his military base. Pure still didn't know he knew about him. He had close connections with Duke and could use this to catch Quinn and take his powers before anyone could interfere. Going to his desk, he grabbed a bottle of whiskey that was out on display and poured himself a clean, nice shot with no ice. "I deserve this for everything I've done today," Jack said as he lifted the glass in the air. Suddenly, he heard a knock at the door. A frustrated Jack placed the glass back on the table and answered it. "What is it?" he said with anger. But when he looked at who it was, he was surprised to see that it was Mona Bree. "I'm here to tell you about an emergency meeting between the Big Four. It will be regarding what happened today. You have to come now." Walking down the hallway, Jack was stomping away, his feet hard on the ground as he plodded along. He was about to call it a night after successfully plotting his plan. What could be so important to call a meeting at this time, and why does it have to be now? He thought, frustrated. It wasn't just any meeting between the leaders, though. Mona had specifically told him that this was a meeting for only the Big Four families, which meant it didn't include the head generals or the Supreme Commander. It was as if something they didn't want them to know about. This was a rare matter, and the only time Jack had been called into a meeting like this before was when they decided to invite him to join the leaders' table, making the Big Three into the Big Four. Eventually, Mona had led him down the hallway, and they stopped just outside the Sundhild family room. When she pushed the heavy door open, the other two could already be seen sitting there waiting. The rooms they stayed in were quite grand and large, and there were several separate rooms. Each one was designed differently to suit their style. Jack looked around the room. Even though it was the same layout, it looked completely different compared to his own. Most of the decor looked like it was from an older era. There were also several paintings of large beasts on the wall, with a single man taking them down. Useless junk, as Jack would have called it, was scattered on top of desks and drawers. Nonetheless, Jack needed to comply, so he sat down at the large rounded table that looked like it was designed for 20, but only the 4 of them were present. This, of course, meant they were sitting quite far away from each other, but Jack liked this anyway. "As the elder of the group, I shall be the one to start the meeting," Mona said, although she didn't look old at all. Bernie looked to be in his 50s, and Jack was just reaching his 30s. Jack had always thought Mona was around the same age as him, but now she had suddenly declared that she was older. He was wondering what type of witchcraft she had to use to look so young. Now that he thought about it, she certainly dressed like a witch as well. Even now in the middle of the night, she was dressed in all black, with a pointy hat and a veil covering her face. "Does the mad women sleep in that?" She stood up from her seat as she talked to the others. "I'm sure you all know why I thought it was necessary to call this meeting, but I did so just to make sure we're all on the same page." "Huh, they know what this is about already. Have they been doing things without me behind my back?" Jack thought. "We're here to talk about the Blade family." "Them again? This is just a waste of time. We need to be dealing with Pure. Oh well, maybe I will learn something about them." "We need to make sure that all our families and fractions, including the subfamilies, receive this message. They are prohibited no matter what, to either go after the student known as Quinn Talon, or try to research which family he has given the ability book to." "What did you say?" Jack shouted as he shot up from his seat. "Ah, I guess you weren't here for that part," Owen replied. "I seem to remember you left the room at that time. The boy who won the match against the Multiplier. Turns out he and his unique ability are under the protection of the Blade family." "Yes," Bernie said, nodding his head up and down with his arms crossed on top of his large belly. "We all heard it. The chains that have been locked away for centuries shall be broken by the Blades, and we all understand what he meant by that." The other 3 all nodded their head, but Jack didn't have a clue. He didn't have a grand history of ability users from the beginning of time. His family and his power were only discovered after the Dalki era. He knew nothing of what this code meant, and he was starting to get increasingly frustrated that no one was informing him. What he did understand was what that made clear. They were ordering nearly every person they could to not touch Quinn Talon. All of this was due to his connection with the Blade family, and he wasn't an exception to this rule most likely. "My plans, they are ruined!" He needed to do something, if he wanted to get that mysterious ability. Now the others would have people keeping a careful eye on him in the military base, whenever they could. It would be impossible for him, even with his connections, to do much without them finding out. He didn't want to do it, but this was the only thing he could do. "Quinn can't be related to the Blades," Jack said, "because I'm sure he's with Pure." There was a brief moment of silence between the other 3 until they all started laughing together shortly after. "That's impossible. Pure and the Blades are black and white. They would never see eye to eye in the current world, Mona replied. But I'm telling you the truth. If you don't believe me, I'll bring Quinn here right now and force a confession out of him. Enough! Bernie said as he slammed his fist on the table. Did you not hear what we just said? No one is to go after the boy, and that includes you, Jack. We don't agree a lot on things, Jack. You can say that again, Owen mumbled. Hearing this, Bernie looked over at Owen out of the corner of his eyes before shaking his head and continuing. But we all agree on this. If you try to lay a finger on that boy, we will do everything in our power to stop you. Who were these Blades to be able to cause such fear and unity between these three powerful forces, yet at the same time seemed to have no power when it came to the things like the military? It just didn't make any sense. Fine, Jack said, sitting back down in his seat. With that, the meeting was quickly over, although they didn't finish it before reminding Jack once again that the military was to know nothing about this, and to warn him about not going after the boy. His hands were tied. If it was just one of the big families telling him to not go after the boy, then he would risk a confrontation, but all three together? His family wasn't strong enough and would never come out alive. Jack was confident in his family's strength. Over time, he had gathered strong abilities and men by his side, and the unique thing about his family. Their abilities were all versatile, while the others only had a single powerful ability. In a way, in his head, Jack had deemed his own family as the strongest power force currently. Even ahead of the military, still, it wasn't enough to start a fight over, especially with the Dalki watching their moves. However, thinking about his family's strength made him think about something else. They were all scared of the Blades. They repeatedly told him not to go after Quinn. What that didn't stop him from doing was going after the Blades. If he got rid of them, he would naturally take their seat of power. The others were afraid of something that happened in the past, but they didn't know Jack's full strength either. He would much rather fight one family than three strong ones, and he would also get whatever power the Blades have, as well as the shadow power. It was the one plus side of Jack's ability. Whatever family he would defeat, essentially their powers would be added to his, even if they refused to join, because he could take it from them with force. The Blade family, let's see how scary you are. Jack was ready for a war.
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.